Ladies, gentlemen, one and all, welcome to a quick troubleshooting video, and by quick I mean I'm going over a lot of things today and this is not going to be quick at all. So, this video is going to be chaptered. If you are having a very specific issue, then please do be sure to actually use the chapter feature on YouTube to find that, that section. All of this will be listed in the description as well. Now, over the years, there has been a lot of sort of complaints going around the internet, particularly in the Steam forums and on Reddit, with regards to the stability of Unification. Unification is pretty damn stable. The problem is that it is a mod that is constrained by the engine. Other mods, such as Crucible, also fall afoul of the engine itself. What do I mean by this? Well, the actual engine itself, the Impossible Creatures engine, was originally made somewhere around 2002 to 2003. It was released, or its first released game was Impossible Creatures, hence the name, which came out in 2003. So, yeah, the engine must have been in development for some time before then. And it was then obviously adapted for Dawn of War, which then came out in 2004. The Dawn of War, or Impossible Creatures engine, is old. Very old. It was made at a time when people didn't have beefy gaming computers, back before they even figured out how to put more than 4 gigabytes of RAM into a system. So, the engine itself is what we call 32-bit. Basically, that means that it is constrained to 2 gigabytes of memory without LAA on 32-bit operating systems, which there shouldn't be any left now, but an example of one would be like Windows 2000 and Windows XP. It would be constrained to 3 gigabytes with LAA on, and with 64-bit operating systems, it is constrained to 4 gigabytes of RAM. So your fancy-dancy gaming computers that have like 256 gigabytes of RAM, DAO doesn't care about that. It is also constrained to only using 1 CPU core. It cannot see any more than that. Unfortunately, the engine cannot be updated to run in 64-bit as it stands. The source code would be needed, which means that is purely reliant on whoever owns that source code, which there's a bit of a debate as to whether Sega owns it, because they own the license, like the IP, or whether Relic have it, because they are the ones that originally made Dawn of War. So, yeah, this mod, as well as every other mod, are constrained by the same problem. So, how do we get around that? First, there is something we need to do. Some of the things that we are going to be doing today require admin access. It's generally just better to give admin access for this anyway, especially if you have your actual Dawn of War installation in C program files. So, to set things to run as admin, there are two specific things here that we need to set. So, first is going to be the Dawn of War mod manager. So let's right click on it, go to properties, go to compatibility, and ensure that run this program as an administrator is ticked. Once you have done so, click apply and click OK. We are then going to do exactly the same thing for the Dawn of War Soulstorm exe, wherever it has gone. There it is, soulstorm.exe. So right click, properties, compatibility, and ensure that this is once again ticked. Click apply and click OK. So, let's go over all the options that the mod manager has to offer. First things first, we are going to start with the checkboxes on the left. First off is Dev. Dev is it essentially runs the game in developer mode. It will generate all sorts of log files that are useful for troubleshooting purposes. If you ever get a SCAR error or an AI error, the log files that this thing generates is what we are requesting. I'll show you how to get those log files later. Next is No Movies. No Movies just removes, well, the movies. It skips them all. So if you are having issues with your game not playing like the campaign movies and stuff like that, see if this is enabled, because if it is, then yeah, it might be skipping the campaign movies as well. I know it says intro movies there, but there have been reported instances of it skipping the campaign movies as well. Next is Force High Poly. This is something that personally I would never tick. What this does is it forces the game to render everything at the highest quality at whatever zoom level you are at. When you zoom out, well, the way that games render things is when you zoom out and away from the model, it reduces the quality of that model so that it doesn't take up quite as much RAM. That will obviously force it to continue to render at high quality. If you are like going right down to the ground and are taking screenshots and things like that, it's not going to matter if you have this off. But this will increase the likelihood of RAM crashes, which, well, I'm recording this all out of order, so I don't know whether I've covered it yet or not. Next, we have High Affinity 6. It says there what it does. Sets the highest thread priority and CPU affinity. Basically, it means that Dawn of War is going to be the highest priority thing that the CPU will dedicate resources to. Personally, I have had no issues with it. It helps some people. It doesn't help others. We have had one recorded instance of it causing startup crashes for someone, but only one person. So you can always try it, see if it helps. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then just turn it off. Next is Disable Fog. Have you ever zoomed out and find that your battlefield has become Silent Hill? Well, with Disable Fog on, you will not get that. This, however, requires admin mode. That's why we set both the mod manager and Soulstorm to run in admin mode. Because if it is not, it will not work. Something to note about dev mode before we move on. Dev mode only works in single player. If you enable it, you will not be able to see any games at all. Also, the AutoExec file, which you can find in the screenshots channel on the Unification Discord, that will only work, or some of the functions will only work with dev mode enabled. So just a little thing to note of that. As of recording, Disable Fog only works with the Steam version. If you do not have the Steam version, it will not work for you, I'm afraid. So let's move on to mitigating crashes. The temp folder error, or dump folder error, or error 183, is probably the most common thing we see in tech support. The reason for this is because that is the message you get when you hit that RAM cap. Unification is quite a big mod, and it has quite a lot of high-quality models and high-quality effects. While they are as optimized as they possibly can be, obviously 4GB RAM cap, so yeah, you're still going to be constrained. So, the main thing you need to do. You cannot run Unification without it, basically, is ensure that LAA is on. I cannot stress that enough. If this text is red, then you are going to be RAM crashing almost immediately. So, make sure you toggle that on. If you have the GOG version of Soulstorm, as in you brought it from GOG, first of all, my sincere apologies. It is possibly the worst way to play DAO currently on the market. But also, the mod manager functions mostly do not work with it. While Igor, the person you see down the bottom left there, Igor the Light, is looking at possibly making a compatibility or a new version of the mod manager that adds compatibility for the GOG version. For the time being, you are going to have to apply LAA manually. How do you do that, you might ask? This extremely bright webpage is the NT Core webpage. This is the home of the 4GB patch. Basically, it is the manual version of LAA. So all you need to do, click the download. That will go into your downloads folder. Then in your downloads folder, just open up the zip file, double click on the 4GB patch, say yes to user account control if it comes up, and then, well, this is on Fear because I patched that earlier, but yes, you would then have to just search for soulstorm.exe and graphicsconfig.exe. Let's see if I can do this without going on the thing that I said. There we go. Yeah, so scroll down, and you want graphicsconfig.exe, and then open. You will then get a message saying that is patched successfully, and then obviously just open it again and do the same for soulstorm.exe. I am obviously not going to do this because I already have it applied via the mod manager, and the game will get exceptionally confused if I do it again. So, that said, let's move on to some further things, because LAA is not the be-all end-all of RAM crash mitigation. So, let's have a look at the settings menu itself, shall we? Because there are some things in there that are quite useful for RAM crash mitigation, and just crash mitigation in general. I'll explain in a minute. So, settings. Now, obviously, the general settings is not important for RAM crashes, but should you be one of those that have a really large monitor and you can't see the text, you can access the font manager here. I will not be going over the font manager in this video. I do not use it myself, and nor do I really know the ins and outs of it, therefore I do not feel qualified talking about it. If you wish to know more about the fonts manager, there is a Steam guide, I believe. I will have a look for one. If you don't find it in the description, then just go to the Unification Discord. There is a FAQ entry, I think it's like 17, 18, I think, that talks about the fonts. So, video. This is basically the in-game settings menu, except there are extra things here. First thing I'll mention is that active video card. If you have a laptop or otherwise running two video cards, this may display the wrong video card. Obviously, it's displaying my one just fine because I only have one video card. But yeah, for laptop users, it may not display your dedicated. It will display your inbuilt. Don't worry about it. If you check warnings.log in the Dawn of War Soulstorm folder, it will state exactly what card it's using. So, for RAM crashes, first things first, screen resolution. Do not go over 1080p. It is very much diminishing returns. If you go to 4K, then you are much more likely to RAM crash. Also, high-res textures over here. That needs to be off. It, again, is kind of diminishing returns. Yeah, okay, it can look nice for the few things that it affects, but yeah, generally it's really not worth it. You might get away with it in a 1v1, but in anything other than that, you're just going to be crashing. Persistent bodies and persistent scarring. Those two stick on their absolute lowest setting. These are massive RAM sinks. So, yeah, turn these to none and low if you are RAM crashing. Personally, I just have them at none and low all the time. It doesn't bother me. But yeah. Something else I normally recommend is that Shadow's detail is set to none. Dawn of War, like I was saying earlier, is a bit of an old game, and its engine can be a little bit jank. It's a very powerful engine, don't get me wrong, like the stuff you can do with it is actually pretty impressive for the time, but it's still quite janky. So, Shadows can crash the game. There was an instance with, say, the Necron Tier 2 Titan Aeonic Orb a few versions ago now, where its shadow was crashing the game. Now, while that has been fixed, I would still recommend having shadows off. It does also obviously use RAM, so you know. Now, texture detail. Textures, obviously, going to consume a bit of RAM. So, you can always bring them down to something like medium or low. a lot of these settings are going to depend on how much or how many players you're trying to play with. If you're trying to play an 8-player game, you're in trouble. If you are, well, I say 8-player all random, then you're in trouble. But yeah, so texture and model, those two are purely dependent on what you are trying to do. As is a world events over here. I personally just stick it to medium because I don't really know what it actually affects. So I'll just say screw it and put it to medium. And dynamic light. Now you might have noticed I have missed two. That is terrain detail and effects detail. These two come back to the sort of jank thing I mentioned earlier. If you have your effects detail on anything other than high, some effects will break. Just outright will not display, or will look weird. This needs to be at high, despite the fact it is one of the highest RAM consumers. Yeah, if you don't have it at high, then some effects will break. Obviously, you can turn it down if you want, but I mean, I can't tell you what to do. But just note that some effects will disappear. Terrain detail also needs to be at high. Otherwise, some maps will have really weird issues with them, like elongated bits of terrain or doodads, where, I don't know, like a wall of a building just ascends into space. So, yeah, that needs to be at high as well, if you can sort of afford to do it. Now, there is also something else that you can do, and that is something called DXVK. What is DXVK, you may ask? Well, it is a Vulkan wrapper. Vulkan is another sort of rendering thing, which it can actually offer performance increases in the games that it's used in. However, only modern cards really have actual proper Vulkan support. So, yeah, that's why it's not just included as standard. So, in the Unification Tech Support channel, in the pins here that are very frequently referenced in this channel, you will find DXVK as of, like, a couple of months ago, as of recording this video. There is also a website which has it. Specifically, it's on GitHub. I will post a link to that in the description. This, however, is the one that I have tested and confirmed works and is used in my videos at the moment. I do not know how newer versions will perform. I don't know if there will be any side effects to it. And speaking of side effects, yes, this has been known to cause a few issues with territories on the planetary map for some people, not everyone. And it also can cause issues with alt-tabbing. Specifically, things like, I can't take thumbnails now with print screen key. I have to use Steam's screenshot feature. Because the print screen key just will not work with DXVK. Incredibly random, I know, but the DAO engine is random, so, you know. So, once you have downloaded DXVK, you just open up the zip file that it downloads, select all of the things within and move them over to the Dawn of War Soulstorm folder. Once that's done, you should have those three within here and it should work just fine. If you wish to get rid of the stats thing in the top left hand corner that it presents, if I just open this in Notepad, there we go. You will need to remove DXVK.HUD equals devinfo, FPS. Just remove that, save it, and then it will get rid of that info for you. And then, of course, if you wish to remove it, because the game instantly crashes after you've installed it, which is an indication that your computer isn't actually compatible with it, then, yeah, just delete the three files that you brought over. So d3, d9.dll, dxgi, there it is, .dll, and dxvk.conf. Something else I will mention is that the Discord app, specifically the desktop version of the Discord app, messes with DAO in many weird ways. So, not only will it randomly apply a texture to the screen when you select the Imperial Guard, or I think it was the Tyranids in the Unification campaign, or it might have been the Dark Eldar. It was definitely one of or two of those three. It also actually interferes with the RAM management. We have no idea why, but it does. It causes far more crashes when you have the Discord app open. So my recommendation is, if you're going to be playing DAO and you're going to be using like high player games, turn off the Discord app. And I don't mean just close it, just minimize it like this. I mean actually go down here, right click on Discord, and quit Discord. If you need to use Discord, use the website version. It's something to do with how Discord hooks into certain applications. So, yeah, the web client for some reason doesn't have that issue, but the desktop version does. If you are still experiencing RAM crashes, then the Troubleshooting Wiki page has a few more things. Specifically, the RAM issues section here. This goes into a lot of detail as to why this happens, as well as having a checklist of things that are generally either recommended or whatever that you can do. So, for example, there's a couple of game rules that will increase your game's RAM usage, like AI MapDB and Heroes here. But yeah, so hopefully, with all that said, you can try and find a sort of like a combination of settings that works for what you're trying to do. Personally, by sticking to like 4 to 6 player games with DXVK and some reduced settings, I haven't had a RAM crash in quite some time. Something else you can do if you are insistent on playing high player games on high settings is having multiple players sharing factions. The way the game works is that each faction is only loaded once, no matter how many players are using it. So, if we have, say, 8 players here, 2 using Chaos Marines, 2 using Dark Angels, 2 using Dark Eldar, and 2 using Chaos Demons, this is effectively, in terms of RAM usage, a 4-player game. during the initial loading time. So, yeah, even better if you have 4 players sharing the same faction and then another 4 players sharing the same faction. That's then effectively while loading a 2-player game. So, yeah, that's... if you like big battles, that's a good way to get around the RAM limitation. So, log files. The log files that I mentioned earlier are in your Dawn of War Soulstorm folder. They will only generate, however, if you have dev mode active. If you do, then you'll be able to find them in the log files folder here. And then you can go to the date that you actually ran the game. It will generate a new log file folder for every single time you run DAO, so make sure that you go in and you clean this log files out occasionally. And then you will find all of these. So, if you get a scar log, scar error, a fatal scar error, you will need to give us the scarlog.txt. If you have a fatal AI error, you will need to give us the AI log.txt. Alternatively, you can just zip up this entire folder and then send it. You can send it in the Unification Discord, in the tech support channel. If I have requested that you test your archives, or Dawn of War is crashing immediately upon startup before getting to the main menu, then there is something you can do to find out what the problem is. If you go to the DAO Mod Manager and click Check for Errors, it will give you either a clean bill of health, like mine has, because I got no errors in the last time I booted this, or it will tell you that a certain file is missing. If that is the case, then the best thing to do would be to test your archive. Now, I'm going to use this Unification Campaign one as an example. You will need to do it on the unification.7z file. So if you right-click on the archive, if you go to Show More Options on Windows 11, because why would you have something in just one menu when you're going to have it in 2, go to 7-zip, and then click Test Archive. This will then check everything within that archive. There are no errors in my campaign archive. That is good. Hopefully, your Unification.7z says the same thing. If it does, then just do a manual reinstall. If it still does it, then you might have to re-download. There might be something that it's just not detecting. Something else you can check is that the actual files that make up Unification are all actually correct. So if we go to our Unification folder, you will find that the files themselves are split into what are called SGAs. SGAs are essentially a compacted / compressed file full of data. So, for example, we have the 13th Company one here. We've got the AdMech, we've got the Blood Angels, etc., etc. Now, unlike in 6.9, these are now split into smaller files. So there are more of them, however, they do generally add up to approximately about 17 gigabytes, I believe, when it is compressed into a zip folder, and about 28, I believe, when it is unpacked. If I go properties here, once it eventually figures it out. Good old Windows. There we go, 29.8. So, If your folder is 29.8 gigabytes, you should be great. And of course, make sure that all of these are around a similar size. Now, obviously, Windows is Windows, and different OSs are different OSs. So your file sizes here may be a slight bit different, but if they're like more than 5,000 kilobytes difference, then yeah, you're gonna probably be going to be kind of having trouble. There's definitely something missing there. So I will just scroll down very slowly so you can see all the file sizes. There we go. So hopefully everything there matches up. Mostly. It's pretty close. And of course, if worst comes to worst, then you can just go to the Unification tech support area. So, to access that, you will need to go, obviously, to the Discord itself. The link will be in the description. Currently, Discord has this thing where it's been hiding channels from people. So, if worst comes to worst, then you can always use the channels and roles section up here to go directly to it. And then, yeah, just make a post in here, try and give as much information as possible, and eventually someone will help you. Obviously, those of us that are in Unification Tech Support are volunteers. We are not like a proper help desk sort of thing. We're not like a company or anything like that. We're just people who pop in and try and assist where possible. Just because that's what we want to do at that particular moment in time. So, obviously, getting impatient is not really going to be very helpful. If you do post in there, obviously try and be patient, because we aren't necessarily going to be around at all times of the day. This is also where you should stick the log files when you get a fatal scar error or AI error. Something that is quite useful to have is the AutoExec. So, what is the AutoExec, you might ask? Well, it is a file that basically allows you to bind certain developer commands to key combinations. It is very useful for not just testing things, but also for like taking screenshots and stuff like that. I mean, I know this isn't necessarily a troubleshooting thing, but I've got nowhere else to include this, so I'm adding it here anyway. So, yeah, if you go to the Unification Discord's screenshots room, or the description, then there will be a link to this page. All you do, click to download it, and then put it directly into your Soulstorm folder. For example, you can see mine here. Brightness warning, I'm going to warn you. There we go. Ow, my eyes. So, yeah, this is the AutoExec, and you can change these specific key combinations to your heart's content. Not all keys work. I am going to warn you. I also want to. There we go. Not all keys work. It's just a matter of finding ones that do work for you. So yeah, that's about all I was going to talk about today. There is always more to talk about. I could start going into like full depth of various other things, but I don't plan to really. This is just mainly for very basic stuff. So, what have we learned today? Well, we have learned how to remove the ambient map fog, we have learned how to set things to run as admin, and we have learned crash mitigation stuff. And a few other things, but you know. So I shall repeat. Unification. Not quite as unstable as certain Steam forum and Reddit users and etc. would have you believe. It can crash, yes, but that's mainly if you do not follow the troubleshooting tips and if you try and force the engine above its own capabilities. The same thing would happen if you play any other mod and try to force the engine above its own capabilities. So, the links to the things I deem important will, of course, be in the description. And hopefully, this guide has been somewhat helpful despite my scatterbrained approach to explaining things. So, thank you very much for watching, everybody. If you have any more questions, then, of course, the Unification Discord is available. And until next time, I have been Caldaris. Goodbye.